Welcome everyone to another episode of the Coffee Bar podcast, the podcast that gives you 20% of the knowledge that transforms 80% of your life. And today we want to talk a little bit more about purpose and career. And we're here with Vince. Is it okay if I say your name like that, Vince?
Yeah, that's great.
Perfect. And we're here with him to talk a little bit more about public speaking. And before we get started, I just want to introduce him really briefly for those of you who don't know him. Vince is a lead pastor at the Bridge Church in Cincinnati, Ohio, where he is at right now. And he's also a public speaking coach. He coaches professionals to craft and deliver impactful conference talks with clarity and confidence. And he's very active on LinkedIn, has a lot of followers. And as I can, say myself, he does amazing content, posts amazing content on LinkedIn. So again, Vince, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me and thanks for your kind words. I'm fairly recent on this whole LinkedIn journey. I just started in June of 2024. So I'm still kind of learning, but it's been a fun ride already.
Awesome. Really great. I mean, your posts really stood out to us immediately and we were like, wow, we need this guy. So we're really thrilled to have you on our podcast today.
Thank you so much. Truly excited to be here.
Awesome. So Vince, before we get going, I have a question for you. So do you know how many minutes or hours a person should wait after waking up in the morning before the first cup of coffee is consumed?
I think I saw this somewhere because supposedly if you have it later, you don't crash, right?
Exactly.
That's the idea. Is it 90 minutes?
Yeah, it's approximately 60 to 90 minutes.
60 to 90,
according to some experts in the field.
I love it. I do not do that. I should do that.
I don't do it immediately. When do you take it? Immediately after waking up?
Immediately. I have it set to brew overnight, so I don't even have to wait for it to brew. It flips on 20 minutes before I wake up. And that's so I wake up and drink.
That's really great.
What about you guys? Do you guys do that? Do you wait?
I wait.
Good
yes.
for you.
To be fair, I started drinking coffee after starting my corporate job.
What's that say? Corporate career is the question.
Yes. So, it was kind of a peer pressure thing, like you have those coffee breaks in your office. You're like, oh, who wants a coffee? And you're like, yeah, I might as well. And that's how I got into, right? So I'm not really addicted to it. It's more like a social thing for me. So I'm not really, in the morning, I'm not craving it. So
good for you, man.
Not yet. Hey, who knows?
That's how every drug starts socially, right?
Yes.
And then goes from there.
If you put it that way, yeah.
I actually just drink matcha. I don't drink much coffee, mostly matcha, which is, I think, a hot take. A lot of people, either you love it or you hate it, probably.
Yeah, wow. So you don't do much coffee, but this is the Coffee Bar podcast?
Exactly. It's because I love the coffee vibe that the coffee bar brings with it. And as Dennis mentioned, like having a coffee with someone, that's a vibe.
Very much. Yes, very social. I love that.
Cool. So I think let's dive in. And as we already talked about, Vince, I mean, fascinating journey. You're a pastor and you're a lead pastor, and then you developed that, or you probably already had that passion for public speaking, but now you're making it part of your life. Can you tell us a little bit more about it? What inspired your transition? And how do you see these roles connecting as well?
Yeah, 100%. I have to be careful when I tell this story because it can get very long. So let me try to do the short version. And I think you said this, but I'm still a full-time pastor. So that's still my main job. My little brother, some people know him. He's also very big on LinkedIn, way bigger than me. Anthony, you guys familiar with him? Anthony Pierri. Yeah, you'll have to look him up afterwards. He's very big. He also used to be a pastor. He got totally out of the church thing and then started working in tech. Ever since then, he does positioning consulting for early stage startups, if that makes sense. So he helps them craft the language for their website and all that sort of thing. So ever since he started that, he was like, hey, you should just do something. in tech on the side, even if it's just for fun, a little side hustle. And I was like, what am I going to do? What am I good at? I'm not good at anything. I know nothing about tech. I have an iPhone and it has some apps on it, and that's about all I know about tech. But he just kept hassling me. So I just started learning about the tech industry with no real destination in mind. I'm just going to learn. I'm going to read some books. I'm going to listen to some podcasts. And one of the ways I started learning about the tech industry was just watching conferences from SaaStr, from Inbound, some of the big tech conferences. I was watching those conferences to learn for myself about how the tech industry works. And the first thing I noticed was, man, these guys and gals are struggling giving these conference talks in front of thousands of people. And I honestly was shocked. I figured someone on the top of the heap when it comes to the tech world, giving talks, and they're really not doing well. I mean, reading off notes, staring at the confidence monitor, visibly nervous, let alone the content being all over the place and just rambling and whatever. So that's when first put the idea into my head of like maybe helping tech people with speaking. That's sort of how I stumbled into it. So I just started posting content, and a lot of it started doing really well. What I realized from that, because I was like, why is anyone excited about the stuff I'm posting? This stuff feels so intuitive and basic to me. But what I discovered is that most public speaking coaches are professional public speakers. And professional public speakers have to craft maybe 1 to 2 talks per year. They have a lot of reps speaking. They have almost no reps writing content because they don't have to. They write a book, they write a talk based on the book, and they're off to the races. Then they're coaching all these people on speaking, and they're telling them advice on what to do with their hands and their body and where to walk on stage. When the people giving these first few talks in the tech industry conference world, they don't know how to write a talk. They don't know how to just put the pieces together. So they're working on all these delivering things. They have no clue how to write a talk. Any pastor, people with my job, could do what I'm doing because we have to write content constantly. I mean, 100 talks a year delivered to hundreds or thousands of people, which in the church world, if you're speaking to several hundred people, they will tell you if you're boring, or they will just stop showing up. Like there's immediate feedback, and every pastor is in this grind of content, immediate feedback, content feedback. So you just get really good at learning how to structure content in ways to keep it engaging. So I kind of stumbled into this missing spot in the public speaking world, in the public speaking coaching world, where nobody has, maybe not nobody, but very few people have really any experience on writing lots of content and how to structure it, how to balance it, all the different tools, that sort of thing. So it's still just a side thing, but as you guys mentioned, it's growing very fast on LinkedIn, and it's all lots of clients coming to me. I still want to do the pastor thing for the long term. So it'll just be sort of a little bit of a task over the coming years on how to balance the two things. Kind of a long answer, but that's the basics.
But interesting.
No, I mean, super interesting. Super interesting. So now you're giving back basically your know-how to the community, to those people that are struggling with public speaking, right? But how did you develop that passion for public speaking? Was it just one morning you said, I want to stand in front of a church and speak to hundreds of people? Or how did your passion for public speaking evolve over the years?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm obviously religious, right? That's part of the territory. So I believe all this stuff that I'm preaching. I believe in Christianity. And for me, as a religious person, I can look back now and see all sorts of things that I believe God did in my life and helped me grow through things and work through things, all that sort of thing. And so my initial desire to become a pastor really was not about speaking. It was just about helping people get connected. For me, I believe connected to God, connected to faith, connected to community, connected to purpose, all those things. So the way you do that in the church world, especially the non-Catholic world, the Protestant world, the evangelical world, it's largely speaking oriented. You take the Bible and you talk about it to people, talk about it with people, and that's sort of that's the driving force between this sort of Protestant church. So I was not naturally very good at it, I will say. I think I had some natural raw skills, but I just started doing it for youth groups, that sort of thing. Looking back, those talks were horrible. But that driving thing of wanting to help people get connected to faith kind of pushed me through it. And then, like I said, the biggest way you get better is by having to write a different talk every week for the same group of people. So you can't recycle anything. It's a very high pressure. If you said the same thing a month ago, everyone says, you said that a month ago, give us something different. It is truly one of the most demanding speaking environments when it comes to creating content. So it was a journey. I'm still on that journey. I worked in churches for many years before I became like the head pastor or lead pastor. So I've been the lead pastor for 4 years now. So as the lead pastor, you even do it a lot more than when you're like an assistant before that. So I've learned a lot over the last 4 years, but I still very much feel like I'm learning and growing, and I still get up there some weeks and get off stage and go, that was horrible. I was boring myself for the last, 30 minutes, but you get better just from doing it. Great question.
And when you do think, okay, that could have been better, like what is something, like I can imagine a lot of people who go on stage or give a public or speak it publicly, like the ones you watch on the conferences that are in tech or anyone, they probably potentially realize when they're boring the audience. What is something you would, like, if I was your client, what is something you would tell me to do if I realize it on stage? I mean, that's probably a little bit more challenging, or after my talk.
Yes, I will say, I think a lot of speakers don't actually realize for a long time. I will say I did not realize for a long time. It probably took 30 or so talks, like writing different talks, before I start to notice, oh, this actually feels different than that other one. This is landing different. The energy in the room is different. It's very subtle to pick up on with a large group, because they're not going to say anything in the moment. It's just body language and energy and little subtle noises people might make responding. But my whole POV is that by the time you're on stage, it's pretty much too late to fix it, because you've got your roadmap already there. And if they're bored, it's probably something that went wrong in the content. Either your hook wasn't strong enough, or you don't have enough stories, or you don't have enough analogies. And it is nearly impossible to change that stuff in the moment. Now, there are a few people who can literally sense it's not working and actually change the content, come up with a new story in the moment. I am not there. I don't know if I'll ever be there. I don't think hardly anyone is there. So I think in the moment, if you can tell people are getting bored, 99% of people, their only option is just to start going through your pieces faster. Just get to the next point until it feels like people are clicking back in. But a ton can be done while you're writing the content you're planning on saying. And if you get that part right, it can be a delight to speak. And there's actually very little pressure on the speaker in the moment if the content is written well, because you'd kind of know this is, it's going to land and it's going to help people.
Perfect. For me, it sounds like preparation is key in public speaking, right?
Preparation is everything.
Yeah. That's all what I also learned sometimes the hard way, right? Sometimes in school, even I thought, I got this presentation, and then you never rehearse it before. And then you're standing in front of the classroom and you're like, oh, wow, I'm not ready for this, right?
You're so nervous, right?
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah,
Exactly.
one of my
So
go ahead.
yeah, no, you go. Sorry.
I was going to say one of my things that I believe is that I don't think most professionals actually have any stage fright. Like, I bet, let me ask you guys, Basil and Dennis, let's go Basil first. If you're, let's say, a large audience, 300 people, 400 people, 1,000 people, whatever, and I handed you a 3x5 card and it had a few sentences written on it. And I said, Basil, can you go up on stage and just read these sentences? How nervous would you be 1 out of 10?
Like 3, 2.
What about you, Dennis?
I would more be a 4.
Okay.
A 4 and a 5.
Great. What about compared to going up there and giving your own talk, that you wrote and planned for the event?
I just did that for the TEDx. Nervous, maybe more like 6 or 7. I was kind of nervous.
Yep. How about you, Dennis?
Yeah, I'm also there around 7.
Yeah.
6, 7.
It depends on the person, but most people are significantly higher to go give a talk than just to read something off a piece of paper. That gap, to me, that is the preparation gap. Whatever amount of anxiety you would feel to just read someone else's content, that is how much actual stage fright you have. Okay. That's your fear of just being on stage in front of people with lights on you and them looking at you. For a lot of people, that reading might be a 3 or a 2 or even a 0. Well, if I just go up and read, who cares? Whatever. So then when it comes to their own talk, they go, oh, I'm so nervous. This is stage fright. I'm like, this is not stage fright. You're just afraid your talk isn't going to land. You're afraid the content isn't going to resonate. You're afraid it's not going to help anybody. And you can solve almost all of those problems before you ever get on stage. You can test and see if the content is going to land. You can practice the talk. You can run different pieces by different people. You can record it and watch it back. And I think you can get your anxiety to speak. You can get your anxiety to give a talk to almost the same level it would be to read something off a piece of paper, because you remove all of the anxiety about the content and you're just left with the anxiety to be on stage in front of people. Does that make sense?
100%.
It's absolutely
super interesting. So then the obvious question is, how do you do it? Well, what is some practical advice you would give your clients, or you can give us, to prepare for a talk, whether it's like a TEDx talk or whether it's a company pitch? I can imagine there might be some similarities.
Yeah. So this is, again, where I've sort of stumbled into this gap in the industry. Is there's not a lot of frameworks out there. There are some, but there's nothing that's like, hey, this is kind of the thing. So most coaches have some sort of template they try to use with people. I do as well. But then I've also got all of these other details of how to structure the content that make it land. It's everything I post on LinkedIn. So high level framework, I have this 4 keys thing: tension, trust, teaching, takeaway. That's sort of a basic flow. But then in the more micro level, for each point, you have to structure everything from abstract to concrete. So you start with an abstract principle, and then you have analogies, and then you have practical examples, and then you have tactical action steps. All of these things, if you watched 100 talks, the ones that work, they're doing almost everything I'm saying intuitively. Again, because if you write a book, you just kind of like force your way into what works, because you have weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks to work on this one talk. So you'll end up there. But these are building blocks of how to do a monologue in ways that land. Another thing I talk with my clients about is something called the 2-minute rule, where if you think about kinds of content, like a story or a meme or a chart or a principle, you have to switch between kinds of content every 2 minutes max. If you stay on one thing longer than 2 minutes, everybody starts zoning out and tuning out. You have to have a very strong hook at the front. I mean, I could go on and on and on. And I haven't I do want to do a book at some point that sort of lays it all out. Right now, it's just sort of all jumbled in my head, and then I keep banging it out and putting it on LinkedIn. But yeah, it's a lot of templates and ways to structure it.
So when you say I mean, the 2 minute rule makes 100% sense. When you say a strong hook, can you tell us a bit more about like the beginning specifically? Because I can imagine this is what people are most scared of, because once you're in the flow, I think it can be easier, but how do you nail the beginning?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually just did a post, the 9 worst ways to start your talk, because people tend to get very gimmicky on the intro. They'll walk up and they'll just launch into a story. They'll be like, when I was 9 years old, like literally first words out of their mouth. They walk on stage in September of 19. It's like so formal and like theatrical and weird. I'm like, what is going on? Why are you doing that? Or they will be like, a great quote. Albert Einstein once said.
That's what he did.
You did a quote?
I did the date thing. So we should have had.
Can I do it? Can I do it? I know it by heart.
Yeah, let's hear it.
I still remember May 21st, 2019, like it was yesterday.
Yeah, that was my start.
But it was good. It landed. It was great.
So again, I ruin people's lives more than I want to, but TEDx talks to me are like a very bad starting point for how to speak well, because they're mostly people, again, authors or subject matter experts. They're almost never people that speak regularly. So they're very, very formal and stilted and awkward, with a few exceptions, like a Simon Sinek one, or what's that other lady? I'm blanking on her name. There are some people who are actually regularly speaking who do TED Talks, and those are better. Most TED Talks are a horrible target for like what to shoot for when it comes to speaking. So I'm not surprised you ended up with the date thing, but it's no judgment. But my point of view is people will fight very hard to listen to even someone they don't like very much, and even someone that's being kind of confusing, if they believe that person has information that they need. So like, if Dennis, if you have some pain in your stomach and you go to the doctor and the doctor says, hey, we have to do a CAT scan or something, or whatever. This is kind of dark, but stay with me. They do the scan and they say, hey, we'll get back to you in a few days. And then they call you and they say, hey, we have the results of your scan and I'm going to take you through them now. You're not like, this guy's speaking kind of slow. I'm a little bored. Or like, why isn't he using his hands more? Or like, why is he standing in one place? You're not thinking about any of that. All that you're thinking about is the results of the body scan or the CAT scan or the brain scan. So that is the state of being you want to get your audience in as fast as possible, because from that point on, it's less like high stakes to keep them engaged if they want to hear what you have to say. And to me, the only way to do that is by starting with a felt need that they have. Right? So what is a pain point in their lives? What is a problem they're facing? What is this situation that they're wrestling with that you can touch that nerve that will keep them hooked for the rest of the time? So you're giving a talk to 20s about how to not blow it in their 20s, right? So you say, hey, I'm Basil, and this is a podcast for people in their 20s to make sure you do not blow your career in your 20s. They're like, okay, tell me more, because I don't want to do that.
I think we should reposition from like how to, thrive in your career to like how to not, fuck it up or like mess it up. I think it would probably attract more people.
100%.
Yes, negative hooks generally do better. You can do some of both, and if you can do both, it can work as well. But especially with speaking, I think you want to go negative. A pain point they're feeling. And you can still do like a positive thing as a pain point. It's like, hey, I want to talk to you about like the difference between people who say they're going to become a millionaire by 30 and the difference and the people who actually become a millionaire by 30. Like that's not necessarily negative, but it's like there's a risk in there. There's a danger in there. Now a TED Talk is probably not going to be a great TED Talk because it's usually more humanitarian, than like just how to get rich. But whatever it is, you got to know your audience. You got to know who's going to be there, but then lead with that pain point. And if they can get that in the first 15 seconds, they will listen the rest of the time. That's why I don't like starting with stories with no context, because even if it's a great story and they're listening, they don't know why they're listening. They have no idea what it has to do with their life. And you have to re-hook them after that.
I did that in my defense. I did that after 20. I did re-hook them.
Yeah, which is better than not hooking them at all. But I didn't watch your TED Talk, Basil, but I would have encouraged you hook, then story. Pain point, then story. Because then they know why they're listening to the story and what's in it for them, not just you talking about yourself. No one cares about the speaker. Everyone cares about themselves. No one clicks on a TED Talk and says, I want to know about that person's life. They see the headline. TED Talks are actually good with usually having some kind of hook in the title. They click it for the hook in the title because they only click it if they believe it will help them in their lives. That's not even selfish. That's just, that's all we do on the internet, right? Why else would you watch something to learn if you don't think it's going to help you?
Definitely. So what you're saying is basically to engage them as fast as possible, start with a pain point. And how do you keep them engaged? You mentioned the loop back to the beginning, right? Like Basil did in his TED Talk. What other options do we have to keep them really engaged during the talk?
Yeah. So I'll just briefly share my 4 T's things so I take people through. So the first thing is tension. That's the pain point. And it is not enough to just say it. You have to really make them feel it. I recommend first 10, 15, even 20%, just driving that hook deeper, 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 deeper. So deep that they will be willing to go on a 25-minute journey with you to get it out, right? It's got to feel like the stakes are very high. That's step number 1, tension. And it's the hook, and then it's an analogy, a story, statistics, whatever, to make it feel really heavy. Like, I got to fix this. I got to fix this, even if I got to look at you and I don't even really like you. Then it's trust building, where before you start telling them what to do, you're building trust that you are a person worth listening to. Generally, the fastest way to do that is not to share any stories of your own expertise or success, but to share stories of your failure, to share examples of how you walked in their shoes, dealing with the same pain point, and you tried different things to get out of it and you couldn't. And then you spend another 10% on that, 15% on that. I had a client who did a talk on how to start a solo marketing business. She's talking to a room full of marketers who are all working in-house. None of them have their own business. She's got her own business. She's on stage and she's like, tension, doesn't it suck working for the man and working in-house? And she's getting them all riled up. Oh man, we got to get out of this. We got to start our own thing. Then she goes, hey, I felt the same way. And here's all this stuff I tried that failed. I tried this building solo. It didn't work. I tried this. It didn't work. I tried this. It didn't work. I was freaked out. Felt everything was falling apart. If you share those stories of failure before you tell them what to do, they trust that you actually know what you're talking about. If you go straight to, you're struggling with this, let me show you how to do it. Everyone's kind of in the back of their mind wondering, well, maybe this just worked for you because you're really smart and you're really gifted and you got talents I don't have. But if you say, no, I was just like you and it didn't work for me at first, but here's what I found that did work, then that's another step. So between tension and trust building, if you do those things well, you have built enough rapport that you can then start telling them things to do. Then you have 2 or 3 teaching points max. You ask yourself, okay, I'm having coffee with somebody or a beer, and they ask me for my advice, and I only have time to tell them 2 or 3 things. What are the 2 or 3 things I'm going to tell them? You cut all the fluff. You cut anything you can find on Google. You stick with things that are unique to you and a little controversial. One of the biggest mistakes people make is that because they feel like they have to prove they know what they're talking about, they'll say a bunch of stuff that's like industry standard rather than the stuff that's unique to them. Cut everything that's industry standard. Just say, here's some stuff that I think you should do that a lot of other people don't do. Focus on those things. And like I said, how you build those points, they has to be the right balance of like punchy, mic drop, tweetable one-liners, analogies, examples. Like you have to structure all those things right. The 2-minute rule in each of those points, so you're not droning on about one thing. And then like practical takeaways at the end, a story at the end. That's essentially attention, trust building, teaching, takeaway. And then in each of those sections, there's like healthy ratios of different kinds of content to keep the flow going.
How do you create an aha moment in any of them? Like, you know, these moments where like the audience is like, wow. Like you just created like 2 or 3 of them for me. One of them was cut anything that's industry standard. How do you create those ones on stage? How can you, when you write your script?
Yeah. One of the tools that I use with clients is, so first of all, you have to actually have something aha to say, right? If you don't have something new to say, you cannot create an aha moment because no one will be surprised by anything you say. If you do have something unique to say, then one principle is to, again, lead that point with what I would call a punchy one-liner. And that is where you blend sort of the status quo POV with your POV and put them side by side in a sticky way. Here's an example. I'm working with a client right now who is he's a UX guy. You guys familiar with UX, obviously. And he was like, he's a UX researcher and he leads UX research teams. And so he was like, they all blow it. And it's not because the research is bad, it's because the presentation is bad. They don't understand that having the right research and the right data does not matter if you do not understand what the stakeholders care about, what it's going to take to persuade them, blah, 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 blah. So we sat down and I said, okay, what is your POV? And he's like, I think you just have to spend way more time than you want to understanding what the stakeholders value and how they think. So, okay, so that's your POV. What's the status quo POV? Well, the status quo is essentially just like they should be able to figure it out for themselves. And if we give them the right data, they should be able to figure out. So how do we put those things side by side? So we ended up, there's a framework to do this, but we ended up with 20% of your job is understanding the study. 80% of your job is understanding the stakeholder. It's got a little bit of a ring to it. It's got some parallel structure, right? 20% understanding the study, 80% understanding the stakeholder. When you put what most people think and what you think side by side, if you convince them, that's what creates the aha, is contrasting how you do things with how everybody else does things right next to each other is generally how it works.
I love that. I really love that. The 20,
Right.
20,
I did a
80
whole post on how to write feature one-liners. That was like a bunch of examples of how to do that side by side thing. So you guys can check that out too if you want, or the listeners. I literally forgot we were doing a podcast.
That's how it should be, right?
You guys are good hosts. You're good hosts. Yeah.
Awesome. Great to hear.
So you mean side by side, verbally, right? Like in the same story. That's what you're saying, and maybe on a slide as well. But that's what you.
Yes, in the way you explain it, you're contrasting. Here's what you think, and here's reality, and in the sentence itself. And if you can get it into the sentence in a memorable way, that is what makes people go, "Oh, I thought that, but now I think this." Like if he had just said, "Hey, your job is really to understand the stakeholder." They'd be like, yeah, we know that. We want to understand our stakeholders. But for him to go, 20% of your job is to study, 80% is the stakeholder. That's like, oh, now I see how different what you're saying is than what I think. You don't always have to have percentages like that. But that sort of thing. To put those two, the wrong idea and the right idea so tightly together so people can see the difference. I just got a new water bottle today.
Nice. What is it? Is it good?
It's I think it's like a fake Owala. You guys know the Owalas? Owala. I don't know.
I don't.
It looks like an Owala, but it doesn't have the brand on it. It's our band at church made water bottles. How corporate is that? How corporate and lame is that? But they
That's really
material,
corporate.
probably. I don't.
Basically, we should have our own bottles, like the coffee.
yeah,
bottle, like,
where are the water bottles? Where are
like there's no brand bottle? We should have like a coffee bottle one. It's a glass. I love it. So Vince, you're also saying that confusion kills talks, right? What do you mean exactly by that? And what are like three things we can do that helps us avoid this when we speak publicly?
Yeah. So I think that I did a post on that, right?
Yeah.
I think that's what you're talking about. Yeah.
We love the answer, so we want everyone to hear it.
Great. I don't actually remember what the post was about, but yeah, you can put it in the notes or whatever. But I think it was the general idea of the post was that this is less true for TED Talks, but for a lot of conference talks in the tech world, in the business world, the speaker finishes and everyone goes, "What was he saying? What was she talking about?" I remember that one part, but like, what was the main thing? They have all these notes and they read the notes later and they're like, "What was that about?"
It happens a lot to me, by the way, as well. I have that feeling often when I'm like hearing like presentations. I'm like, okay, nice.
What's he saying?
What was that? Yeah.
Yes, right. So that's the confusion I'm talking about is just people being confused as to what you're saying and the point of what you're saying. So 3 things to do to fix that. First thing, most of the time, talks are confusing to the audience because talks are confusing to the speaker. The person giving the talk does not really understand how the pieces of their talk fit together. Like if you were to remove their notes and say, "Give me the Cliff Notes version of your talk," they would go, let me see my notes. If you don't understand your own talk without your notes, and I'm not saying you have to remember every detail, but if you can't give a 30,000 foot view of your talk without your notes, no one is going to have the faintest clue of what you're talking about while you use your notes. So the foundation of giving a talk that isn't confusing is to be able to understand how the pieces fit together. And one of the most practical tools to do that well is to make sure your outline is memorized. I actually don't encourage people to memorize their talk word for word. I think that gets it very performancy and stilted and very formal. But if you can memorize your outline, that sets you up for success. And generally, as you're memorizing it, you will end up rewriting it because you go, "Wait, why am I talking about this thing before that thing?" So memorize your outline, I think, is one very key thing. One of the things, and then so 2 more things that you'll have to do is you'll have to make sure your talk is only solving one problem. This is another very common thing. A lot of talks, it will go problem A and then solution A, and then problem B and then solution B, problem C, solution C, and it's all these different things. There's actually a kind of format, talk format called like the listicle that people do all the time. Where they say, "Let me tell you 5 lessons I've learned as a product manager or CPO or whatever." And that to me is one of the worst ways to do a talk because you're going weird, random problem solution. There's nothing to tie it together other than these are just 5 things that were on my brain when I was writing the talk. That's a recipe for confusion. So memorize the outline, pick one problem and then solve it. You can solve it in multiple points. That's fine, but don't have multiple problems that you're solving. And then the last thing I will say, and this is sort of a solution to a lot of problems with public speaking, but go through the horrendous torture of just recording yourself at least one time beforehand. Videotape yourself, watch it back. Everyone, I don't anymore. I still watch it after the fact, but early on, I did all the time. And again, I'm sort of in a weird other boat because I'm doing it literally so much that you do kind of just develop certain muscles that give you basic instincts on certain things. But yeah, you record yourself, watch it back. You will be your best critic. If you watch it and you go, this feels kind of confusing, it is confusing. If you go, this feels kind of boring, it is boring. The only thing that you'll be off on is hating the sound of your own voice. No one hates the sound of your voice. You just hate the sound of your voice because you're used to hearing it through your own like ears and bone structure, not through the air. So don't worry about how your voice sounds, but everything else, worry about it and dial it.
Wow, that's super helpful. And yeah, I mean, you basically it just fits into the point where you're saying earlier that like everything is in preparation.
Yeah,
everything.
What I would also say is that like public speaking is like a muscle. You mentioned it right now. It's like a muscle you train at the gym. It's not going to grow after one like bicep curl, right? But if you do it often, multiple times, it will grow eventually. And I would say this is also applicable to the public speaking part, right? The more you practice it, the more you record yourself and go through the torture of hearing your own voice, the better you get in the future.
100%.
So yeah, that's really valuable. I love it.
One thing you also talk about, Vince, is I saw it, I think one of your posts as well, is the voice, right? Like you say there are different voices. So is there anything in general, because you just mentioned or people are concerned about their own voice? Is there anything you can teach them or like any advice you give your clients when on that topic of the voice?
Of your own like speaking voice?
Yes.
I think the post I did on voices was more like personas. If I'm thinking of the one you're thinking of.
Like you have, 3 different voices, 3 different personas, like the teaching, I think was one of them.
Yeah. So that's actually not about like the sound of your voice. That framework in particular is essentially about the idea of like, and there's combinations you can do of these 3, but essentially you have like 3 ways of convincing people of something. One is data. One is your own experience, which is more anecdotal. And one is the fact that you are just essentially currently dealing with the same problem they're dealing with. I called it expert, mentor, and fellow traveler. Either you're an expert who's done the research and here's this solutions. You're a mentor. I've been where you were and I sort of came out of it. Or you're a fellow traveler. Hey, I'm still dealing with the issues you're dealing with and let's figure this out together. Each of those are sort of different ways of trying to convince somebody, different authority. The actual word in my head was like authority postures, but no one knows what that means, including me probably. But so I just call them like different voices. But it's essentially different ways of leveraging the authority you have when you get on stage. And so that's just sort of a judgment call of like which hat to put on in the moment. There are environments where data needs to lead the way. And there's also environments where saying, hey, I'm in the trenches with you currently. I haven't even solved this yet. That there's environments where that is going to get you the most trust and the most sort of permission to lead the audience depending on the context. Your actual question though is about like the sound of your voice, right?
Yeah, but what you're saying also super interesting. If you have something on the voice as well, yes, but also that was just more related to the content, but still interesting. And I was thinking like who would talk about the fellow traveler thing, but then I remembered, for example, there's one famous TED talk. I don't recall the name, but it's called it's about procrastination. I think it's one of the most watched TED talks. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yeah.
And
I have not seen it. No.
And he's basically saying like, yes, I'm experiencing this and like, I'm still there. And then, the whole hook is like, yes, there's things with deadlines where you procrastinate, but then in life, there's also things with no deadlines. And this is where we should actually think whether we procrastinate or not. But the whole point is that he's still having this issue and still it's such an insightful talk.
Yes. And people feel so much connection when you say, I'm still struggling. The other very strategic moment to use this is when you're in crisis and you're the leader. So if the company is in crisis and no one knows what should happen next, the best thing to do is to get up there and say, here's all the information and I don't know yet either. I am right there with you trying to figure it out. I am looking at the same numbers. Here's the steps we're going to take to try to fix the situation, but I do not have all the answers. When it's that kind of situation, that is what gives you permission to say, here's what we're going to do next. If you act like you've got data you don't have, you just lose trust. But if you say, we don't have the data, we don't have a black and white plan, I'm trying to figure this out the same as you, but here is what we're going to do going forward, that builds the trust that people will say, okay, I'll follow you, because you're positioning yourself as that fellow traveler kind of person.
Awesome. Really great. Yeah, the trust building is crucial, right? Otherwise, as you mentioned, you lose them, and then the ship is sinking. So maybe I'm a little bit more interested in how we can help young professionals dealing with going on stage. We talked about that stage fright, right? And according to the National Institutes of Mental Health, public speaking is more feared than death, right? And yeah, I myself sometimes feel like, depends on the preparation, right? We already talked about it. I'm scared to speak in front of people. So on top of preparing properly, what other steps do we have out there to take away that anxiety before going on stage? Maybe the top 3 steps you have for our audience.
Let's say you've done all the prep, you've done everything you can, but now you're there and you're nervous. You're still freaking out. It's very common also, especially the first, bunch of reps. I think a few things that have helped me. One is to say, it's okay to be nervous. I don't actually have to stop being nervous to get through this talk. And that's okay. That can just lower the pressure. If you're stop being nervous, it just raises it. But the reality is, if you have done the preparation and you have something helpful to say, it will still add value, even if you're nervous, right? If there was some speaker who was giving a talk on how to start a podcast, and you really trusted this person, they had written a book on starting a podcast that you both loved, and you were like, this is going to be so good. And that person got up there and gave the talk and gave you 5 things you were going to run with after that talk that were really going to help you. And he was nervous while he did it. You'd be like, whatever, right? This was still super helpful. And I think we forget that people actually, at the end of the day, don't really care if you're nervous, if what you're saying is going to help their lives. So you just remind yourself, it's okay to be nervous. It's okay to be nervous. It's okay to be nervous. A lot of it is just kind of self-talk. You know what I mean? Another thing you can tell yourself is, if I bomb this talk and have to walk off stage and it actually does all fall apart, I'm also not going to die, right? That will not be the end of my life. That will not be the end of my career. That will not be the end of my story. And just kind of being okay with the very worst thing you can think of happening, and saying, okay, if literally the worst possible thing happens, I'll be okay. I had a client who, her very first talk, she has her business, she has a solo business, it's doing really well. So her very first talk was also at the very first conference she ever attended. So as nervous as you can be. And she got up there and she blanked out. At one point, she had practiced so much and she blanked out, and she said, guys, I forgot what I was going to say next. Oops. And everybody started clapping, and we're just rooting for her, So then the other flip side of that is that sometimes when our worst fears come true, people are very gracious. Like they know it's scary. They know it's scary for everybody. So like you can literally walk off stage, catch your breath, and be like, guys, sorry, I just freaked out. And they'll be like, yeah, great job getting back on. Like it's really not the end of the world, even if everything goes bad. And then I think the last thing I would say is just doing some just basic deep breaths, right? You just breathe. There's a million different breathing techniques. There's like the 5-5-5 one. There's the 4-7-8 one. Take some deep breaths. Lower the stakes. It's okay if I blow this. It's okay if everything falls apart. I'm just here to help people. And then just give it your best shot.
Awesome. So if I maybe quickly narrow it down like to five points. So number 1, preparation. Number 2, own the anxiety. It's okay to be nervous. Own it. Number 3, use that self-talk saying it's okay, right? Number 4, put it into perspective. It's not that bad if you blank out or whatever. We're all humans. We do mistakes, right? And number 5, basic deep breathing.
I love it. Yep. 100%.
One other one that I also loved is how you said, don't just focus on yourself, focus on the message, right? Like, I feel like this is, in my experience, like this helps in a lot of, I guess, situations in life, that when you take away the focus from yourself and you realize that it's something bigger than yourself, which is in this case could be the audience, and you really feel like you have something valuable to say, which most people have when they're on stage, then that helped me a lot, where I felt like, okay, I'm focusing on the message. I really think this could benefit at least one person in the audience. And then it's about the message and not so much about me anymore.
I love that. I totally agree. I think that's so good. I will also say, there are speaking coaches that are really, really good at managing the anxiety of the moment. That's less of like my thing. I'm way more on the content side and on all this other stuff we've been talking about. So if people are curious to research that, there's a ton of great people out there who like that is their specialty.
Yeah. And you said though, there's not a lot of coaches who help with the content creation, and we already talked about it a lot. One thing that I'm also curious about is, this is probably maybe not as applicable to as many other people, but if you are, like want to do more public speaking, like for example, I do, but I can imagine a lot of other people actually do as well. What do you do? Like, is it just like creating more content? And I saw you did the email template as well. Is there anything else that you would advise your clients or anyone who wants to get practice or get some reps?
Yeah, great question. So this is another thing that I am not an expert in, and this is on my 2025 plan, is to learn how to help people do that better. So 99% of my clients come to me having already been asked to speak. There's a whole nother world where you will hire a coach who will help you get the gigs, whether they're free or paid. I don't do any of that. Like, if people are like, I want to start public speaking, I'm like, I'm not your guy. I don't know what you do. I have to do this every day. I have no choice. You know what I mean? So I'm hoping to sort of first go through that process myself and then start taking people on that journey, because I really only speak in the religious world. I don't even speak in like the entrepreneur world. I want to start doing that myself and then be able to help people with it. I will say though, me and the guy who I did that cold email template post with, that was all his content. I just made it into a nice graphic. We're going to do a bunch of posts on that, and it's going to be all his thoughts, because he's actually done a ton of that and helped a bunch of people get talks, and he's gotten all these talks. So he's going to be giving me the content. I'm going to be making them nice and pretty, and then we'll both post them. I think we're doing a carousel in like a week that's like the complete guide to getting paid to speak if you've never spoken before. So I am doing that series of content largely to learn myself from him. I sort of tricked him into giving me some free consulting, but hopefully a win-win. Yeah. Hopefully it will help him continue to grow his LinkedIn as well. So yeah, but so yeah, I don't have much to say on that, but hopefully there'll be some stuff coming soon. And Will Greenblatt, anyone listening to this podcast, go look him up. He runs a cohort for solopreneurs to build their personal brands, start speaking, build their business through speaking. Pascal Bergman, maybe we can link her to that's her whole thing to like go from I've never spoken to I'm getting paid to speak. She has a whole formula and system she takes people through. I want to be able to offer something like that at some point. I just don't have the experience or the really knowledge to share. But the one thing I will say is like I have had conference organizers DM me and say, send me speakers because we can't find a lot. We can't find enough. So if you're willing to start doing it for free, you can get reps. Like it is not that hard to get slots in different environments to speak if you're kind of willing to start at the bottom and work your way up. And then I'll say to anybody in their 20s, it really does pay massive dividends in all other areas of life. You do a couple talks, all of a sudden sales starts feeling easier because you're like, well, this is less scary than the TED talk I just did. Basil, right? You're like, probably, actually, I'm interested to hear from you, Basil. Did you find other things got less scary after doing that?
Yes, I do. I did sales, like going from door to door. So I think that helped me a lot. That was
probably helped you with the TED talk.
Yeah, that helped with, yeah. But yeah, and now like podcasting, for example, now I feel like it's less pressure than doing the talk because it's recorded and everything.
Yeah,
We're doing a podcast.
Much easier.
Forgot about that.
I forgot about that. But yeah,
Awesome,
any reps you can do, I think, build your confidence for leading staff, leading a staff meeting, and speaking at all hands, whatever.
Dennis, can you just elaborate a little bit more on like why you just already touched upon it, like why public speaking is so crucial for your career? I mean, we already talked about it, but I really believe it's like the 20% you need to master. Do you have like an example maybe from you probably have more insights than us from like a client that you worked with or someone else that you maybe talked to where you could actually feel that as well?
Where it like paid off for them?
Yeah, where it's
in other areas.
It helps them to unlock like their career, like if they want to take the next step in their career, for example.
Yeah, that is a great question. I haven't done a lot of work with clients who are in their 20s. You know what I mean? But I will say maybe this would be helpful to an audience in their 20s. A lot of the people I've worked with in their 30s or 40s or 50s, it is a massive mountain that feels so heavy for them. And a lot of them will do the talk and it opens a ton of doors for their business. A lot of founders, CEOs, they'll get client work in the pipeline and they've been leading companies since their 20s, but they've never spoken before. So if you want to build a business, I think speaking is one of the best ways to do it. And just the sooner you do it, the better. I imagine you have some 20s who aren't trying to build a business either. But yeah, I think we probably said the main things is that like in your 20s, a lot of stuff is just really scary, right? Your first staff member who's reporting to you that you're their boss, the first time you got to do their annual review, the first time you have to fire somebody, hiring great people and trying to get them on your team is very scary. First time you have to give a presentation to the layer of leadership above you or 2 layers above you. All of these things are very scary, and generally they are all less scary than speaking on stage in front of a group of people. So if you can do that one early, everything else I think feels a lot easier. I don't think I have a great story for that. I mean, I've definitely felt it in my own journey as well. I mean, I've been speaking for a long time now. Here's one example. As I started posting on LinkedIn, I saw all these people being like, it's so scary to start posting on LinkedIn. I was like, what? Like, what's scary? It's like, what's scary about posting on LinkedIn? But if you have to go through all these speaking things, posting on building a personal brand becomes like The easiest thing ever. Doing vertical video and posting vertical video on LinkedIn. You're like, I can do multiple takes and post them and like pick the one I like best. It's like no fear in that. Where if you've never spoken on stage in real life, I think that's a lot scarier as well. So yeah, that's my best on that.
Awesome. Perfect.
Good.
I mean, great conversation, Vince. We really appreciate your time joining us today. We're not quite done yet. We're still having our world famous espresso round. But before that, Basil, please, what are your key takeaways from our conversation with Vince today?
Yeah, so the first one was from the very beginning. I thought it was interesting when you said, Vince, that like a lot of public speaking coaches only focus on the delivery and not the preparation so much. And I think that's a very interesting key takeaway. Also for coaches to do that, but also that there's a need there, because then we transition into like, okay, well, how can we get rid of stage fright? How can we not bore the audience? And, you know, it's like 90% preparation, which is my second key takeaway. But that is like, that combination to me is very interesting. And I mean, you're right there, that niche. So that's amazing. And then the third one that I think is like that, the 4 T's, right? Like, trying to get them again is, at first you build attention, you kind of describe the problem, then you build trust, and it makes a lot of sense to me. Showing vulnerability builds trust. I think that's the key takeaway in itself. And then you have the teaching, 2 to 3 points, and then in the end you have the takeaways. Yeah, I thought that was amazing and a huge value. So thank you from my side. How about you, Dennis?
Well, you mentioned all of the ones I wanted to talk about, but one that stood out to me for sure is like the TED Talks are really a bad example of public speaking, because they're like really scripted, really formal, right? And writing different scripts over and over again really will improve your public speaking eventually. That's my first one. Number 2 is preparation is key. It's like a muscle. It's like going to the gym. We have to do it all over again to get better at it, and record yourself and go through the pain to hearing yourself. And number 3 is get your audience hooked as fast as possible with a pinpoint, and go as deep as you want, man, and go all the way back up if needed. But if you have them, you have them, and then you win. You win your presentation. So really, really great key takeaways, Vince. Highly appreciate your time. And yeah, Basil, are you ready for the world famous espresso round?
Are you, Vince? Okay, so it's 5 quick questions, and then like, I mean, the answer can be as long as you want it to be honest. But the first one is, what is your favorite book and why?
You guys sent this to me in advance. I'd really think about it. If I'm honest with myself, like what books do I actually enjoy reading the most? There's a series of books called The Chronicles of Narnia. Have you guys heard of that? Okay, yeah. So the books are just amazing. They're basically kids' books, but every time I reread them, I cry like 100 times. They're just so beautiful and heartwarming. So that's a series. So it's a little bit of a skirting the question, but that whole series, I mean, it's basically as long as one like big book when you read them. Yeah. So yeah, Chronicles of Narnia.
Okay. Counts. Definitely. What is one piece of advice you would give to your 25-year-old self?
I think it would be ask for help. I think in my late teens, early 20s, I felt like winners won on their own. And I just felt like if I have to ask somebody for help with anything, I've already lost. And that was probably the dumbest mindset to be in. And what I've learned since then is when you look at successful people around you, it's impossible to tell the difference between the ones who are brilliant and the ones who asked for a lot of help, because you will end up in the same place in life. If you're willing to work hard, you can be brilliant or you can ask for help and you'll end up in the same place. So ask for help find somebody who is where you want to be and just ask them for help. It's the greatest gift to them, because anyone who's built something, all they want to do is help other people to build as well. And it's the greatest gift to yourself.
Wow. What if you had a massive billboard and you could write one sentence on it? What would it be?
I mean, it might be that, right? It might be ask for help. With my public speaking hat on, it would be just do one talk. I will say this one is a habit I am working on. It is not, I am a fellow traveler when it comes to this habit. Well, maybe not with you guys. You might have already had this habit locked in, but I'm embarrassed to say that at 38 years old, I still do not have a consistent everyday wake up time. Like some days I'm up early, ready to go. Some days I sleep in longer than I want to. And when I am up consistently early at the same time for long stretches, my life just feels so much better. And I always end up staying up too late, making LinkedIn posts and then sleeping in. And it's so dumb. So that's one habit I'm still working on. And when I do, it makes my life way better.
We'll have an episode on sleep where it might be interesting that they'll talk about that this is one way. Honestly, like they say exactly that you should do it, but they also say why and how.
Wow. I'll be tuning into that one. I'd love to hear.
Stay tuned for that one. Yeah. What would be one guest we should have coffee with in the future? So you listen to that podcast apart from the sleeping expert.
Yeah. So this is 20% that gets you 80% of the results for people in their 20s. I have a good friend. Can I give you a few real quick?
Please.
One is Callie. I do not know how to pronounce her last name. It's like BUR something. I'll send it to you. She also is killing it on LinkedIn. She's actually doing way better than me. She teaches soft skills to software engineers. And she is a massive following. Yeah, it's such a niche and it's such a need. And she's an incredible communicator. And she's another one too, where she part of her story was she either got passed over for a promotion or fired or something because her people skills were so bad. And then she grinded it out and learned how to be better interpersonally. I may have botched that story. She might be like, no, it was something like that. She just recently wrote about it. It was something like that. And now she coaches people on that. She's amazing. My brother or his partner might be a good fit. They just turned 30 and are a 2-man, 7-figure business who is doing really well, that they built from scratch on LinkedIn. They would be another good one. Anthony and Rob, or one of them. And those would probably be my 3 off the top recs. Obviously, Will, who I mentioned, or Pascal, but those are more, I don't know how many speaking people you want to have, but they're great as well.
Amazing. That's
awesome.
Amazing.
Awesome. We'll make sure to reach out to them. Awesome. Well, with that, another great episode of our Coffee Bar podcast goes to an end. Thank you so much, Vince, for joining us on that journey today. Really helpful advice for young professionals to speak in public and get better at it. And guys, if you want to hear more about how to master 80% of your life, tune into Coffee Bar Podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It was truly a great time. Great to get to know you guys.